Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. I'm going to introduce my guest in a second, but I am on camera today. You can go to YouTube with my massive, giant audience. I'm joking. Where are you guys? Please subscribe. It's kind of embarrassing. Like, where are all my listeners? Why aren't you subscribed? Maybe because you're already annoyed listening to me enough. Why would you go the second step of actually subscribing on YouTube? And that's fine. Don't subscribe, do subscribe, but I'm also on YouTube. You can watch me there. And you can watch this podcast and my beautiful guest, Allyn, who I'm about to introduce. Okay, couple things. I now am going to, I joined a Cloud 10 network, which I love. They're wonderful, but I'm going to be doing an additional episode every week. And to many of you might be like, I can barely listen to one episode a week. Well, guess what? You'll now be getting 2 episodes a week, 10 to 15 minutes. They're going to be like recap episodes and probably just a lot of me alone talking about how I'm pulling out my hair and losing my marbles over parenting a teen, parenthood, just to like being a wife, being a professional Uber driver. Just kidding. I don't really drive Uber, but I might as well because that's all I do all day is pick up kids and drive them to things. And then I think that's all I have today before I introduce Allyn. I don't love the blouse I'm wearing. I have to say blouse because I'm now entering that phase of my life where it's like I'm kind of an old lady, Allyn. So I'm like, what am I going to wear today? Which blouse am I going to wear? It is so unflattering and like boxy. So it's not, so if you're watching me on YouTube, it's no, not cute. I will never put this on my body again. It just looks like a potato sack.
We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
All right. I'm going to introduce you all to Allyn Amerongen. Did I say that right? I did.
You need to back up and add comedian to your list of...
I'm not a comedian. Nobody thinks I am except for me, which is the pathetic and sad part.
No, I'm like, Allyn, be quiet. Let her do her thing. I want to listen to this. I just want to be here. And
the sad part is literally like, nobody thinks I'm as funny as I am. So like, my older sister, Peggy, and I do the same thing. And I think my other sister, Michelle, does. We all get this from our dad, where we say something and nobody else will laugh except for us at ourselves. And we think we are like the funniest people in the world. And people are just like, oh my God, what is wrong with them? Like laughing till we cry. My sister, Peggy, is worse than I am. She's so funny. Anyways, thank you for saying that. And thank you you don't use the word blouse yet. You're young.
No, but it's not, I was like, it looks great. And it's so hard getting ready or dressed for this because there's just a little bit. And you're like, what am I?
Because you're like, it's just like your head wearing? And like your linebacker shoulder. Well, not yours, but my linebacker shoulders. And then it's like, well, what do you really look like? Like maybe I could lean on a table and like have more. I don't know. It's never very flattering having this angle of just like your face and everything. No. Okay. I go off on tangents all the time. Allyn Amerongen, which it took me a solid 5 minutes to pronounce your name because I can really never do anything right, is a podcaster herself, a new podcaster. She has the best name for a podcast pretty much I've ever heard. It's called When Heaven Meets Hell. Allyn is a mental health advocate, a coach, and a podcast host. And I have been playing tag with her for, I would say, several months to get her on. I guess you found me through my beautiful friend, Tara Newell, who has been on my podcast and she's one of those people that just really lifts other people up, after she survived that horrific Dirty John attack. And, you know, she really gives back to the planet and is a wonderful girl. I've met her for lunch, and we need more Taras in the world. And we also need more Allyn. So welcome to the podcast, Allyn.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a beautiful kind of little circle that I've been introduced to, and I'm just very happy to be here and connect with you.
Well, you know, what's funny is I mean, there's a million podcasts, right? But there's this community, I think, of women that do this, and men that really are in it for the right reasons. And what the goal is sharing our stories. And if you have the interview format, it's just to really like help people. And I think there's a lot of really good people in it. And so when somebody comes to me and they're like, I'm starting a new podcast, you know, there's a million podcasts that are started every day, but it's nice to see somebody that's in it for the right reasons. And I think that's really important. So let's start here. Tell me a little bit about you and where you're from.
Yeah, I am from Bend, Oregon, and I was born and raised, went away for college, but came back. And this is just kind of where my roots are, my family is. And my background is in kind of the chronic illness, chronic health field. And that is something that I struggled with a lot growing up, ever since I was super young, about 10 or 11. That was an issue for me, and come to find out late 20s, throughout some EMDR therapy, that all was triggered by a sexual assault when I was younger, but I didn't know that for a long time. So really my adolescence looked a lot different than kind of the typical childhood. My family life was wonderful and stable, and I have a beautiful family, but was battling a lot of health issues throughout high school, college, all of that. And then afterwards...
Can you tell me what the okay, so you found out about this sexual abuse, and I'm so sorry to hear that. And you know how common, I know you know this, that is, that these illnesses manifest because we literally, our bodies can't take the pain, can't take it. I'm a huge fan of EMDR, by the way. Huge fan. I think it's like one of the best therapies. And if you're listening right now, look into it. I think it's amazing and really has helped me personally. And I want to continue doing it. So tell me, what were you battling with, like illness wise?
Yeah. And I think that this contributes to it in general, is that it was all very unclear for a long time. I didn't have a diagnosis. My kind of cliff notes on it is I went undiagnosed for 10 years, misdiagnosed with an autoimmune disorder for 4. And then I was just really searching for answers. After that, I ended up at the Mayo Clinic in Florida. And so I was all the way across the country. I mean, this was a huge thing that we were trying to solve. And pain-wise, it started as back pain and just manifested as complete body pain. I mean, it started as just like, oh, my back hurts a little bit. And they said, it's scoliosis. You're going to grow out of it. Because I was young at the time. And then
Allyn, what, because you're young. What age were you?
I was 10 when I went back through my records. I was 10 when I first went in.
Okay, so you started having issues with like back pain, joint, like that kind of pain that was unbearable to live with at 10.
Yeah.
And do you mind me asking, and again, if you're not comfortable with this, it's a safe space. And I can take anything out. When have you tracked back when the sexual abuse started?
It was at 7.
Okay. So that makes sense. So then
it totally made sense.
Yeah. So your body, I mean, obviously I talk about this all the time, and people that are listening are probably like, shut up, Meghan, we already know that. But your brains obviously are not fully developed for women until I think they say 27, 28. So when we go through trauma as kids, we don't understand like how to process that, and it can manifest into physical ailments. Like for me, it was my brain. It was major depressive disorder, like anxiety, but all of this manifests. So 10 years old, that's really young. And I'm sorry that you,
Thank you.
I'm sorry that you went through the abuse so horrifically young.
Yeah. When I came, I mean, you go through it and you go to doctors because that's where you think you're supposed to go, and you look for answers, and you're trying to make it make sense. And we did that for so long, and you're just exhausting everything, and everyone's saying everything looks normal, and they're trying to mitigate the pain as best as possible. And so, I mean, everything from my afternoons were physical therapy and not soccer practice, and trying every kind of modality possible for years and years and years. And I went, and they referred me when I was 18 and I was going to college, and they said, I was going through a major depressive episode at that time too. And they said, we don't really know what else to do right now, but we think seeing a therapist would be really helpful for you. So they referred me to someone who dealt with people who had chronic health issues, and she was great. I started seeing her off and on for about 10 years. And it's when she retired, just within the last few years. And she said, do you want a referral to someone? And I said, I really am curious. I think that there's something else. Like, I couldn't put a finger on it, but I'm like, there's something else, and I need to explore it more. I said, I want to look into trauma work and EMDR. And she referred me to my current therapist. And that's kind of how this all started. And I knew I had an idea of an incident, and that's the first memory that we started working on. And immediately when we dropped into it, it was a puzzle piece. It was like, you never want to remember or think of these things, but it was like, oh my gosh, I get it. And to me, at 7, it made sense that my body would lock it down and, shut it down and fragment all these things. But then it couldn't do it anymore after 3 years or so, and it just started to manifest physically for me.
Can I ask you a question? So the body is an amazing thing, like our minds are able to do that to protect ourselves. I believe that.
Yeah.
But then you feel this, like I understand. I'll say that. I'll leave it at that. I've blocked out big chunks of my childhood. And part of me, and I want to know if this is how you felt, I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know the truth. Did you feel that way?
Yeah. I think on some level, and I think that's probably, I look at it, and it's very hard. You have a lot of hard conversations. I mean, it's awful. We're a very close family. How do you explain this to your family, my parents? It's like, how was it today? And I was just like, and they're saying when these things happen, my therapist is like, it's happening to you in real time. Your body doesn't know time. So I'm grieving this as if it just happened, even though it's 20 something years later. And it was just terrible. And we had a lot of conversations, and there was a lot of guilt, I think, on my parents' end, and which rightfully so. Any parent wants to protect their child, and also the fact that we had gone through decades of trying to figure it out and couldn't. And for me, my conversation with them was, how could you have known? How could we have known? And also, I feel like this came at a time when we were ready to work with it. And, you can look back and say, oh, I wish we knew right then or decades ago or whatever. But for me, I'm just such a timing person. And I think maybe we weren't ever ready to look at it straight in the face when it was, kind of like you're saying. And it came at the time when no one's ever ready to handle it. But I think it came at a time when I guess we could look at it and sit with it.
Do you mind me asking if you're comfortable and you don't need to answer if this was like this was like a family member, or like a babysitter. It wasn't your direct family. Like, so that you're saying they had no idea that any of this had happened?
It was at a doctor's appointment.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, which just kind of jabbed the knife in a little bit more, I think. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Allyn, I'm so sorry. God.
Thank you.
That's horrific. Yeah. And your mom and your dad. So I have a 10 and a 14-year-old, which I talked about, and I have girls. I can't imagine the pain that your parents feel knowing that and not having answers. And so my question is, are you able to come after that person all these years later, or?
No.
Okay.
And it's interesting. I think that's, so it's my parents, and then I have a dad. I have a dad, obviously. My parents, I have an older brother. Okay. And I think, dad and brother go into kind of justice mode. And I think I am too, but I was more just struck with, grief. And you're still expected to live normal life because no one really knows. And it's the weirdest thing to try to explain. But then, there are questions of, well, what do you want to do about it? Or what do you do about it? And everyone's kind of trying to understand, and it is so odd. And, you're trying to explain EMDR and how did this, it's all, people are learning more and more about it, I think, but, it's kind of hard to explain. And, I think for me personally, I needed to kind of verify some of what I had recalled in terms of who I wanted to get the records of, like, who was in the room, stuff like that. I hit on kind of an interesting time because it was back when they were still using paper a lot.
Yeah.
And so I tried to request stuff just in terms of being curious, and like I needed to validate that for myself, and it was gone. It was prior to when they moved everything over digital, and it was kind of past that mark. It was more than 20 years ago, so I forget what the time frame is on that, but it's gone. And that was just kind of a sign to me. I'm just a sign person. I'm a God person. I was like,
me too.
Okay, it's not for you to pursue. And I had to sit with that, and it bites. Yeah. But I say it's for a reason. I have to focus on myself and heal and sit with that. And that's what I did. That's what we did as a family. And you move forward with it. I think you can drive yourself crazy with the... Yeah. But
let me just say this. So for the listeners listening, and people come to this podcast for all different kinds of reasons, whether they're grieving, like going through loss, just all different kinds of human experiences that we all go through. I recently did EMDR, and I tapped into something that I just was not prepared to deal with. Yeah. And when you do it and you go, oh my God, and you have this, I'll say this, in one of my situations, I've talked about this before, so I'm trying to say this for the audience and also for you, because I want you to know I can relate in a different way. Because we all go through our own pain, and we all go through our own experiences in life. And I don't understand your pain. You don't understand mine. The listener doesn't understand ours. But it doesn't mean that our pain isn't the most horrific pain to us ourselves individually, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when I was talking to my therapist and working through this memory, I had witnessed my sister pass away when I was 2, and I've talked a lot about this on the podcast. And my mom found her, and she came downstairs, and she was screaming, and I was left in that high chair for hours. like not maybe not hours, but like neighbors, paramedics came in, everything. And I held like this horrific guilt that I just couldn't handle for my entire life. And I'm old, Allyn. You're still young. You have years of like life left. But I mean, I'm not that old, but I am. I talk about blouses on the podcast. So let's be real. I'm older. And I realized talking through this, because, you know, I don't know what kind of EMDR you did, but I did the one where the ball goes back and forth and you follow with your eyes. And I realized that all of these years, I have been carrying this guilt about my mom, what my mom went through. Like, and I never for all these years realized it until I flashed back into this memory of like, I've had to live my whole life trying to like make my mom happy, like do things that will impress my mom. And I'm bringing this example to kind of like take you out, because I know that this is so horrifically painful for you to talk about. But just as a reminder to people that might be listening, that you don't have to live with your pain. You don't have to live with the trauma of a memory that you might know is lurking. And that memory could manifest into like drug addiction, like all different kinds of things, alcoholism, which is so common because you're an ACE, I'm an ACE. So that's an adverse childhood experience. We both know that. Maybe the listeners don't. And a lot of times ACEs end up dying early, getting cancer, like, you know, they're victims a lot of times of sexual abuse. And our bodies, like we talked about, like your body manifested into like illness, like an illness, because you couldn't do it. And that's kind of what I wanted to say about it. Cause I think you're so fresh into this still. I mean, you said it's only a few years old that you tapped into this memory, that I think it's important to like, and I know you know this and I'm acting like I'm your mom, but like go easy on yourself. And I hope you know that, like, cause that is horrific. I
appreciate it.
That's horrific.
Thank you.
And you did. And I know you know this, but you didn't deserve that. And I think every abuse victim that can never get the justice from the perpetrator, or never get the sorry, because I know what it's like not to get that sorry. It's really hard to carry. Right? Yeah.
It's an interesting, I mean, I think the knowledge is power. I think there's a lot of things in my life that it's, you know, you weigh and you're like, do I wish I knew that or not? And this being one, but I also am like, oh, it has been such a light bulb moment, but seeing it just in different ways. And so, yeah, this was January of 2023. So that's a year that I had the session and recalled it. And we spent a lot of time working on it, and I'm still seeing her, and we aren't solely focusing on that, but it comes up. I mean, anytime I have a medical appointment and things like that, I mean, I had an MRI done, I think last week or the last few weeks, and it comes up to where I'm like, oh, my body feels a little funny. Like or something. I'm just, you know, and you catch yourself and you're like, oh, well, at least I know where it's coming from, kind of, and you can work with it. And so I think, you know, the knowledge is power and stuff, but I appreciate that because, and I would say that to other people too, is the go easy, because there is this pressure, and I had such a pressure on myself to just like go back into life. Life is still going. Life is waiting for you. But I had so much anger and guilt that I would just wrestle with at night, especially I think because I would try to go through the day and I was just a hollow, numb person. And then at night I would just want to unleash, and you can't. It's like, how do you unleash? I think it's such an interesting thing. Anger. I really learned anger in this experience. And I feel like there's not a way in our society to appropriately release anger. And it frustrated the crap out of me. I've never been an angry person. Anger is not a go-to emotion for me by any means. And I finally tapped into anger in this. I think I was angry for my younger self. I was also angry that there wasn't anything to do. I'm a doer. I was like, what can we do? There's nothing to do. There's no justice in any of it. And I would just sit here at night and be pissed. And I'm like, I can't do anything. If I scream, someone's going to hear me and think something's wrong. If I rage, I'm going to break everything, and that's not good. If there's no good thing to do. And like, I felt so confined by this box of society of there's nowhere to go because you have to be good and you can't break and you can't be loud and you have to be good. And it was so suffocating to me. And I think that just kind of hindered my journey also, was learning how to work with anger and how to do it in a good way, I guess, or in a
what are some of,
way.
because I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm very I'm almost like too honest with people. I think they're probably
it.
Maybe you could tone it down like a skosh, Megan. But yeah. I deal with so much anger. Like, I'm pissed. I'm pissed. Okay. And I'm like, I do this podcast, but like, if anybody's coming to me and they're like, you have all the answers, well, guess what? You're listening to the wrong podcast, because I'm not a therapist. I'm just a gal wearing a blouse.
With a blouse and a mic.
I can't stop talking about the blouse. But kidding aside, I think that, in my opinion, I think that anger is, one of the hardest emotions, to be honest with you. I don't know what you think about this. I would rather be like crying and sad and in that space all day long than angry. Because what anger does in my case is it manifests. I had something happen to me a week ago and it was really, really awful. And I'm not going to go into it because I really don't want to give any more light to this topic. But what I can tell you is I had such a severe panic attack that I started like convulsing and shaking. And I had a friend standing there with me. And my friend was like, Megan, you can't drive a car. Because I was about to get into my car because something had happened. And she said, you can't get behind the wheel. And honestly, Allyn, I blinked out. Like, I don't really remember it because it was that bad. And I was so mad. I was so mad that anger is such a scary place, because they say it stems from love, right? I think that people that are sensitive, and I consider myself very sensitive, have a way harder time with processing anger. Right. So like, anger for me manifests in the middle of the night.
Same.
I don't know about
same.
You.
Totally.
Okay,
the
so
nights are awful.
we should call each other and chat.
Yes.
I'm up. It's usually 2:30. And I sit there and I stew, and my brain just cannot turn off. And it's just so unhealthy. It's so unhealthy for us. But it's something that, like, I know for me, using myself, I have to learn to be able to process this, but I also don't want to walk away from it in a sick way. Does that make sense? Like, I want to be able to own my anger and own being in that place, because I feel like I have a right to it and I deserve it. And I know that's not healthy. Tell me how you feel about that.
I think that totally makes sense. I'm so sorry for what you went through, obviously.
Well, I'll tell you offline.
Well, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay. You don't have
offline.
to at all.
Yeah.
But I have been in that space when you're like, I've been there, and it's that it's to your point of like, I blacked out. It's a blinding, they say it's like a blinding rage. And I think that you get heightened. And I think being a sensitive person too, you feel things more, but also, at least for me, sometimes I feel like I feel more for others. And so I, at least in my experiences, have like dulled my anger a little bit, but it will pile up. And then I will just feel like I want to burst. And so it reaches that point. And And yeah, a lot of time, I mean, it is the night. Nights are very hard for me in general. When I'm going through a harder time, and in this phase in particular, and then also too in my relationship, coming out of the relationship, which we can talk about later, but that was really hard for me. And it's ruminating. I ruminate, and it's trying to make it make sense or figure out what to do or how to use it. And sometimes I think you can't use anger well, and like you have to let it be and be a tool to kind of teach you and to work with and to fuel you. And sometimes I think it's like, oh, I want to be active with my anger, but sometimes I'm like, maybe the anger just needs to work with what's inside of me and kind of like control, alt, delete things and be an internal thing as opposed to like me spewing on someone. But I haven't mastered anger. Anger honestly is newer to me. I'm trying to get more comfortable with it. I'm trying to let it be there instead of, being the person who's just good and you don't experience these things and whatever. And I think it can teach you a lot, and I'm trying to just kind of let it be.
I think that you deserve this anger place.
Thank you.
And I agree with you with your point of like, we really don't have like, we all have all these like things in society where we can like, go do yoga. I hate yoga with a freaking passion. We can meditate. And I had the best guest ever, Henry Shookman, on, and I love his app. I've started using it. It's called The Way. I'm going to plug that for him. And meditation is a good thing. I'm finding it doesn't mean my anger's gone. It's just like ways to deal with it. But the yoga, hell no. I've always thought about going to like one of those places where you can break glass or like do the axe throwing. Like people have recommended that. I don't think I need anger management, but I wish there was like a lighter version of it. But I do think because you are so fresh in the place that you're in, that I think that they say there's no such thing as the 7 stages of grief. By the way, I had a famous doctor on a couple years ago. I can't even remember his name, and I'm sorry to say that, but they said that that's a myth. That's not real. There's no such thing as the 7 stages. And I'm going to lose my marbles trying to remember who it was. But I mean, I loved this doctor. They were great, but I don't really believe that. I do think that we have these stages of grief in like a trauma response, or like me, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. I think you probably were too.
I have been too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that these are all things that we carry with our diagnosis, and anger is a huge piece of it. Let me ask you, because you are, and I hate saying you're young. I hope you don't take offense to that. I would kill to be young again. But just to like have all of this happen in such a short amount of time, but also get the answers of like, oh, well, this makes sense. This is why I was sick. This is why I was. Are you finding that your body is like letting go of like, are you still like having flare ups? Like, tell me about that piece of it. I would love to know that.
That's an excellent question. I wish I had a great answer for you. As you asked that, I was like, oh gosh, because the timing has been so odd in that this happened early 2023. I became aware of it January 2023, did a ton of work around it, and was feeling like, okay, I have my feet under me. I just want time. I can work remote. I was like, Allyn, you take a break. All you've been doing is doctor's appointments, therapy, working on yourself. And I was in a good place. And I went out to Montana for a month. And that is when I met my ex. And that is when that whole relationship started. And I think that just, my body has never had I want to say a break, but with that, there was so much that went on in that physically, mentally, emotionally. And my body did terrible in that relationship. And so coming out of that ended in October. And my body just took a complete nosedive, obviously, which was not a surprise. And I've been rebuilding since. I feel a lot better now. And I feel like I'm finally in that phase of like, okay, well, let's see where you're really at now that, you know, I'm working through things, but it's taken a long time to finally get to this point where I feel kind of like, okay, free of kind of the crap and see kind of how you're actually doing with everything. But I feel like I don't have that great of data for you on that one.
No, that's okay. And it sounds like too, like that's a very fresh relationship. Was this like, and it makes sense that you would find yourself in these in a relationship like that because of the background. So this was an abusive, mentally abusive relationship, right? Correct? Just from what I understand.
Mentally and became physically. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is somebody that was like wooing you, love bombing you. I just am curious. Yeah. Okay. Makes
100%,
sense.
100%. Yeah.
And was this like your first like really serious relationship or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had dated before and was dating. My priority and focus had always been my health. And so I never really seriously dated. I mean, I had shorter durations of relationships and stuff, but this was, I finally felt like, oh my gosh, I have answers, pieces are together. Like I kind of can focus on life. And it was a lightning bolt. It hit and but it was quick and fast. And
can you tell me a little bit about this? Because I know it's such a huge part of your story.
Yeah, we met on a dating app. I had initially swiped no and somehow came back around and had more on his bio. And I swiped yes, which I say is like, oh my, how different my life would be if that hadn't have happened. Mm-hmm. And swiped yes. And from there, it was just off to the races. And it was very quick with the love bombing, but I never fully identified it because it seems so outrageous to me. Like these things of saying I love you so fast within like a few days. I was like, this is a joke. No one obviously loves someone that fast. I kind of laughed it off and it was just fast. I mean, within 2 weeks, because we were in separate places at this time. And so within 2 weeks, we were spending the 4th of July together. A week after that, I was out with him for a long family vacation. Within a few weeks after that, he was here visiting my family. He proposed. And it was just fast. Throughout that process, his ex-girlfriend was kind of introduced as still being around, which I was never aware of. And always became kind of more and more of an issue for us. And when things ended in October, it was because she had found a letter of mine that I had written him for his birthday, and she confronted him. And as it would turn out, he had been cheating on both of us with each other. So we had 2 of us going at the same time, but then there were dozens and dozens of other women throughout that period of time that he had been with, that we found out about through a Facebook group. And it made a talk about, it's all these things that come after the fact, but it made the whole timeline of everything make sense. Mm-hmm. And he admitted to everything. And October was the last time I talked to him. October was the last time I saw him. But it was just such an abrupt cut off of things. I mean, he broke up with me in a text message. And
because you had busted him for his behavior, correct?
I didn't. No, I didn't know about anything. He had been by his other girlfriends. And so he broke up with me to try to save that relationship. And then he came back around saying, it's really hard for me that you've chosen to believe all these things, but I love you and I'm sorry I lied. You know, I understand that you believe it because I also lied to you. And to me, it was just like, well, I don't know why you just said this.
Let me ask you a question. Did he, because this is such a common story, it's like these kind of like predators look for women that have had rough backgrounds, you know, like meaning some sort of trauma, abuse survivors, whatever it be. Did you like when you met him, was it like one of those things where you like meet and you're like, let me tell you what's happened to me in my life? And he's like, light bulb. Is that kind of what happened? Because that's what I think that happens with these men.
Yeah.
Is they go for these women and like you go out on this date. Like when I was young, many eons ago, I've been with my husband for like he's 20. I mean, we're in year 23. We met young, but I dated some snakes. I'll say that. And I feel like I'm like somebody that's like, let me tell you how it is. I'm going to spill my guts on the first date. Like we're in love. I just wanted that so much, you know, like I wanted like what my parents had because they were so happily married. So I'm very lucky I didn't find myself with a man like that because I could have ended up like that in a second, you know? Is that how it happened? Like you first date, you're like, this is, and we're so in love because you shared. That's what I'm asking in a roundabout way.
Yeah. No, I get it. I too, I mean, same thing. My background is my parents have been together for 30 something years now. I think. I mean, that's my standard. My standard is, you know, commitment.
You want what they have.
Yeah. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And I don't.
It's out there, Allyn. It's out there for you. All good things. I'm telling you, I feel it. All good things. Like it's all good things for you ahead. I want you to know that.
I really appreciate it.
So they've been together for like 30 something years. Yeah.
Yeah. And my brother has a great marriage as well and a beautiful, beautiful family. And so I think in our family as a whole, I think maybe one divorce, like in our extended family, but it's not what I was raised around or anything. And so I've been, you know, raised around really amazing relationships and just what I was looking for. I wasn't dating to date or anything. And I know I am usually pretty reserved in talking about my chronic health stuff. And I didn't disclose it all up front. So the first time we met, he didn't know everything. But I remember the very first time that we were together in the car talking, we kind of had a little road trip. And I remember telling him about what had happened and kind of recalling that memory and what had happened. And he seemed empathetic, but it was a really short kind of conversation. And it's always like, I don't know what I expect anyone to ever say to things like that. I don't have an expectation of how
there's no like manual when you like spill your guts and you're like, and this person will react this way because it doesn't work that way, right?
Totally. So in my mind, I was like, that was a good response. And that was good. And we didn't talk about it a ton from then. And that was fine because for as much as I'm open and honest and I talk on all platforms to all people about these things, in my personal life, I feel like I don't want to be a burden sometimes to some people, or especially in a new relationship. I just am like, I don't want it to be about me. I don't want to talk about this. And so I think I doled it down a little bit. So he knew, but not a ton, but he knew enough. He's very smart. He's very calculated. But I think more than anything, I've talked to Dr. Nadine about this.
I didn't know you knew Dr. Nay.
Yeah, I had her on the show and everything. Good. I love her.
She's coming back on soon. I haven't had her on in forever. I miss her. Yeah, she
love
was my
her.
therapist for years.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So she was my very first guest on this podcast 4 years ago.
Was she? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had her on and you like kind of disclosed, she's like the pro. She came up with love bombing and all of that. That's like her thing. Yeah.
Totally. But she was, she goes over the big 5 personality traits about kind of what these people look for in terms of like being open and agreeable and conscientious, which I always kind of like, but I was like, oh my gosh, that's me to a T. And she said, in her relationship with a wolf, that was her as well. And I think more than anything that those are things that he probably saw in me, is that, and that they look for in relationships too, is they look for people who have a good outside image and are successful and
look a certain way.
And going to make them look. And I think more than anything, he had that and then learned more and more about me and then could kind of sink his teeth in from there. And so I think that's kind of how the process went. But he really took it. He
did a number on you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now let me ask you, because I want to, for the sake of time, and I know I could talk to you forever because you've gone through so much and I'm so sorry. But like what I love is that you've taken this pain and turned it into something. So tell me about like why you decided to start this podcast, because it's still new, right? It's just started a couple months ago. Okay. And tell me about that piece of it.
Yeah. So it's When Heaven Meets Hell is a limited episode narrative series. So I'm about halfway through it right now. It's on all platforms and stuff. But I knew immediately after this happened that I wanted to do something with my story. I had no idea what. I think it was kind of similar to my other experience in that I knew that there wouldn't be a lot of justice in it. There was a kind of ongoing case and some things going on in terms of intimate partner violence that would end up being dropped. And I just felt like so much had happened and it was such a dark and twisted web and experience. And when I would talk to people, they would say that is insane, or that's like a Dateline story or whatever. And and I was like, I guess so. That's just my experience or whatever. But I felt like I needed to get it out in some way. And I also felt like this shaped me in every way possible. It was a million little deaths that I went in the hole completely. I mean, I didn't reply to anyone. I didn't talk to anyone. I lived at my parents' house for 8 months. I had the same carry-on bag. I didn't unpack that. I mean, my life, there's so much of a ripple effect that came from this experience. And you don't just come back from that. You don't just come back to life and pick up and just act like nothing happened. And I'm like, how do I talk about that? And what do I say to that? And this was just kind of the best way that I could figure out to do it and have it be there also for someone who might be going through it, whether it's maybe in the past or present or future. And that just kind of sparked it. I had no idea how to do it or what I wanted it to look like or anything. I just kind of put one foot in front of the next and started learning more about stuff and reaching out to people. And I've had such a great community of other podcasters helping me and stuff like that. So I'm so fortunate and grateful for that. And it's just kind of become what it is. And it's kind of this verbal diary, I guess, of my experience that feels so stretchy to share. And, I'm sure a lot of people can relate, and probably you can relate sometimes, that I do it and I'm like, oh my gosh, should I have said that? Or what did I do? And then I come back to like, I'm saying it for that girl who was in her parents' guest room, just completely broken, trying to make it make sense. And going back to that and like, what does she need to hear? And that's really who I'm doing it for. And it's been great. And I'm just kind of feeling my way through it, I feel like. But
I think you're probably like, I mean, we're all on a healing journey,
Yeah.
like we all are. And I think what you're doing You know, I say all the time, I started this podcast because I was in the worst, possible place. I was having horrible panic attacks where I thought I was dying at night. And just like you, I was like, you know what? Like this is something like that I can do not only for myself, but maybe there's one person out there. I'm going to get emotional because it's very touching what you're saying. That can be affected and helped.
Yeah.
Right. And is sitting there and gone through like, you know, I don't think there's a lot of people that really understand what, you know, they know the word PTSD and they're just like, what, like they don't understand what it means. And when it stems from childhood, it's like something you carry with you and it's really hard to get away from it. It's kind of like always like in your brain, you know, like we talked about being up at night or whatever it is. Yeah. So I think not only do you have the best name When Heaven Meets Hell for a podcast, it's really important that you do this. And this is like the mom in me. So you can like, will be like a healing journey for you. And then for my listeners and for you that are out there, like we can continue to heal. We're going to go backwards, by the way, all the time. I go backwards every day. I'm a complete hypocrite. I'm sitting here like, I have a podcast. Let me tell you how to live your life. That's not why I do this. I am so heavily flawed. I make so many freaking mistakes on a daily basis. I give the bird left and right in traffic. I'm not the best mom. I'm the biggest pain in the ass of a wife like you've probably ever met. But we all are flawed. We all are here on this planet. And if you haven't gone through anything, you're going to, and it's how you do it. And you, Allyn, should be proud of yourself because you're taking your life back. You're young. There's a great guy out there, if that's what you want, that's like waiting in the wings. And this is just a piece of your story. And by you sharing, someone else out there is listening to When Heaven Meets Hell and they're going, well, I'm going to be okay too. Yeah. So you like keep doing this, you know?
Thank you.
And I'm like going to listen to it. I haven't listened to it yet, but I've been meaning to.
That's okay.
But I'm going to. No, I'm going to, because now the problem with me is I knew you were coming on the podcast. And if I already know the story, everyone knows this about me. I'll be like, do you remember in 1985 when you talked about the red bird coming? Like, I'll give the whole story away. So you don't want that. Allyn, where can people find you?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love you. People can find me on Instagram at Allyn. It's ALLYN .Amerongen, AMERONGEN. Probably pops up. I'm probably the only one. The show is When Heaven Meets Hell. It is on all streaming platforms for podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and on TikTok. I'm new. I'm trying it out. I'm trying to be, with it.
Oh my God, TikTok's a nightmare. I don't understand it.
I don't either.
It's so confusing. I feel so
old.
Okay, well then imagine how I feel, because I'm like, hey everyone, here I am. I'm going to do, here's my dogs. Like, I don't understand it, but I still put stuff out and it's embarrassing. Yeah.
I don't know how to work it, but
it's like, how do all these people do? I don't know. It's a whole, we could do a separate episode about like how to do a TikTok.
Yes. Someone please help me. I remember I've been Googling like how to TikTok basically, but it is When Heaven Meets Hell on there, and that is the main platforms.
Well, I'm so deeply honored to have you on. I think you're a wonderful girl, and you keep sharing your story. You're helping people, and a lot of people right now. I mean, I'm going to close with this because it's the biggest part of my platform is suicide prevention. We're closing out this. I mean, we're midway through the month right now, but by this, well, no, we'll still have days in. Okay. That's my brain. I know that you can understand being in this dark place. And, and when you struggle with, the thoughts of suicide, it's a very awful place to be. And I just heard, I mean, I feel like on a daily basis, I hear stories. I know we all do. Another, like somebody like has taken their own life. Today, I was reading about somebody that was on America's Got Talent, some young girl, like a cheerleader. From the outside, we see people and we think, wow, they have this, or they're so happy, or they have that. Like, take a step back. I say this all the time. Check on your friends. The quiet ones are the ones you need to check on, not like the loudmouth Meghan Judge who talks about this and told everyone that she knows that she was struggling. That's rare. Your quietest friends are the ones that need the most help. Check on them. Like Allyn said, she was quiet. She went into her parents' house for 8 months. She didn't want to leave. The ones that are not wanting to go on, like the hermit thing, like those are all people like you need to check on. We have an epidemic in our country. Our government, this should be first and foremost in what we do to help our younger generation is like, we have a crisis, a mental health crisis, and I will spend the rest of my life fighting for all the families and people that have struggled with this. So please check on your friends. In closing, thanks again, Allyn. In closing, keep going. You matter. Your story matters. Thanks, Allyn.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.